Hi students, so this video is to explain about the final project that we are going to do for Not Always a Valley of Tears, the novel we are reading. So instead of having a test about this book, we're going to do a final project about it. And in this video, I'll explain to you how to do it. So for this project, you get several choices. The first choice you need to make is, do you want to do a writing project or a presentation? So if you do a writing project, you will write 3 to 5 paragraphs using good grammar and vocabulary. You must type it and submit it on Blackboard. So just if you are taking writing class, you will use the skills that you use in writing class to help you to prepare an essay about this topic. If you don't want to do an essay, you could do a presentation. If you do a presentation, you will speak for 3 to 5 minutes about one of the topics. You will use good grammar and vocabulary in your presentation, and you will use a visual aid such as a video or a PowerPoint presentation and turn it in. So you first make this choice of whether you would rather do writing or presentation. Whichever one you do, you can choose again from these topics. Only one topic is for presentation only. Topics 1 through 4 can be a writing project or a presentation. So number 1, describe 3 lessons you learned about disability from this book. So you will create 1 paragraph or 1 point in your talk about each lesson. Describe the lesson, use a quote, and explain what you learned. So for example, maybe you learned that some places are not accessible to people who use wheelchairs. So you would write, you would explain the lesson that you learned and use a quote from the book to illustrate it. Number 2, describe 3 people in the book who had an effect on Pasquale's life, or she had an effect on their lives. You will write 1 paragraph about each person. Describe the person, use a quote, and describe the effects of the relationship. Number 3, Pasquale's family immigrated from Mexico. Discuss the causes or effects of their immigration. You can also use ideas from Chapter 2 of your textbook when we studied immigration. Number 4, Pasquale is a bilingual person. How did being bilingual and bicultural impact her life? So you will write 2 or 3 paragraphs. Each one should describe a different way that being bilingual or bicultural impacted her life. Number 5 is only if you would like to do a presentation. Do more research about one of the topics and explain it to us during class. Be sure to explain how the topic relates to Pasquale's life. Here are some of the topics. You could write about accessible technology, the disability rights movement and protests, polio or post-polio syndrome, or another topic. If you have a different project idea, please talk to me as soon as possible to get approval. So in this essay, you are going to use a quote from our textbook. And most people probably haven't had the experience of using quotes in writing in English before. However, it's very important to learn how to use quotes in writing. It's really part of academic classes. So if you take a class in psychology or business or another area, you might need to use quotes when you do the writing for that class. That's why we practice it in our class using quotes from Pasquale's book. So there are going to be 7 steps of how you will use a quote in your writing. Step number 1, make sure to choose a quote that connects to the topic of your paper. And number 2, connect it to one of your points. So this means that if you are writing about one of Pasquale's family members and how they affected her, you would need to make sure to choose a quote that relates to that person or describes that person, and you would put the quote in the appropriate paragraph. So if you're writing about 3 different people, you need to make sure to write about the 3 people in the correct paragraph order. Number 3, introduce the quote by providing the author or organization credentials. So in the case of our project, you are just going to be saying Pasquale said, or Pasquale, something about Pasquale, right? Because she is the only person that we are probably quoting. Number 4, we use a signal phrase before each quote. So we always want to start with a signal phrase. What is a signal phrase? Well, scroll down a little bit on your paper and you can see a list of signal phrases. So some of the signal phrases are, and I will give some examples of them in speaking using Pascuala as the example. Okay, so here's an example. According to Pascuala, or in her article, well, it's not an article, it's a book, so we'd say, in her book, Pascuala says, or in the opinion of Pascuala, or Pascuala suggests that, or Pascuala argues that. Now, instead of using the word suggest or argue, you could use any of these other words. So you could say Pascuala believes, okay, you could say Pascuala points out. Any of those are appropriate to use in place of as one of your reporting verbs. So before you say the quote, make sure to say Pascuala says. Don't just drop the quote. Dropping a quote means when we use a quote, but we don't like introduce it in any way. We just stick it in there. So always use a signal phrase. All right, number 5, use quotation marks around a quote of 2 or more words taken directly from the source. So I'm now going to show what quotation marks look like in the example, and here they are. You can see the quotation marks at the beginning of the quote and at the end of the quote. So that makes sure we know which exact words are taken from the book. So remember, inside of the quotation marks would be the exact words from the book that you would copy, okay? Then after the quote, you can see that we put number 6, an in-text citation. In this case, we just need to put a parentheses, which are these lines, and the page number where the quote is from. So all of your quotes pretty much are going to be from Pascuala's book. So you just need to put the parentheses and then the page number that they are in. Okay, finally, explain what the quote means. Use several sentences to explain how the quote applies to the main point of the paragraph and to the thesis statement of the paper. This is very important. We don't just want to end a paragraph with a quote. It's very important that we always link our quotes to our own ideas. And the way to connect our quotes to our own ideas is to explain what the quote means. So let's look at an example of a quote of a paragraph from Pascuala's book that includes a quote. Or this is an example paragraph from one of our final project topics about people who had an impact on Pascuala. So that's topic number 2. So 3 people who had an effect on Pascuala's life. So I start with the topic sentence. One person who had a significant impact on Pascuala's life was her mother. This is the topic sentence because it shows what the main idea of the paragraph and what the entire paragraph is going to be about. After Pascuala became sick with polio, her mother was the only person who was convinced she would live. Her mom would take care of Pascuala's every need. She slept with her at night and fed her during the day. Pascuala explained. Now you can see that I used a signal phrase. Pascuala explained to introduce the quote. I didn't just drop the quote in there without any background or anything like that. I made sure to provide that signal phrase, okay? So now I have the quote. She would manage to give me several ounces of milk each morning, taking her an hour to do so. Her dedicated love probably nourished me more. And then I put parentheses and page 16. So that way I give credit for my quote and I explain the origin or where my quote is from. After the quote, I say, this shows that Pascuala's mom gave her both the practical and the emotional support that kept her alive during the terrible illness. So after a quote, it's a great idea to use the words this shows, because that provides a link to my own ideas about the topic. I never want to just end with a quote. Okay, so to begin working on your final project, you are going to need to prepare an outline, and the outline is going to be due November 29th, so you have time. And the final project itself is due December 6th, so you also have time for that. So the outline is, maybe you have done an outline in writing class before. The outline is the skeleton, okay? Just the basics of the essay or project presentation that you are working on. It's not necessary to write the whole essay for the 29th or prepare the whole project for the 29th. It's only necessary to write the main idea and 3 supporting ideas. So now I'm going to tell a little bit about how you're going to write that. First, on the top of the page, you need to circle whether you're doing writing or presentation, and then circle your topic. So remember, if you have another idea for a topic, you can also let me know about that, okay? Then for the main idea, you're going to write what will be your thesis. That's the main idea for your whole essay or your main idea of the presentation, which is pretty much the same. So I would write, for example, there are 3 lessons about disability that I learned from Not Always a Valley of Tears. Or there are 3 people who impacted Pasquale's life in Not Always a Valley of Tears. Or there are 3 reasons why Pasquale's family immigrated. Or there are 3 impacts of Pasquale's bilingual and biculturalism. Okay, so you will basically start by saying there are 3 things. In support number 1, you'll write about the first thing. So for example, I could say the first person who supported Pasquale is her mom. Here, I would just write the page number. Like if I was going to eventually end up with this paragraph, I might write page 16. So here I would write page 16, and then I would write a little detail like she took care of her when nobody else would, when everyone else believed that she would die or something like that. Okay, support number 2. The second person who impacted Pasquale is, okay, and then do the same thing. Provide the page number and then provide a little bit of information about it. And the same thing with number 3. Okay, so I will provide more information for you about this on the 15th when we have class again, and you'll still have enough time to do a lot of work on this before it's due. Okay, so but for now I just want to introduce this to you, and I want you to use this using quotes information, okay, when you are writing your discussion board. So you have a discussion board post for number 2, okay? So when you're writing your discussion board and answering the questions, I would say make sure to include a quote and quote appropriately. So when you quote appropriate, so for example, if I'm going to describe something that was interesting or surprising to me, maybe I'm going to describe something about Pasquale, how Pasquale protested. So I would say, according to Pasquale, and then I would put the quotation marks and use a quote from the book. And then afterwards, I would say, this shows that blah, blah, blah. And I would say, this was surprising to me because, or this was interesting to me because. So make sure to use that using quotes document to help you with your discussion boards and also to help you with your final project for the paper. If you have any questions, just email me and let me know. Hope you have a good day off, and I'll see you next week when Pasquale visits. Be sure to bring your book so she can sign it. Thanks, guys.